achieved.
Well, this has been quite interesting. I was able to sit down and watch the first Mayweather-McGregor press conference in Los Angeles. I've only seen snippets of the Toronto one, which went down today. I'm hoping to get a chance to sit down and watch that later. Obviously, we have two more stops. The last one, when Conor goes home, is going to be insane. But quite honestly, I've ripped on Conor a lot. I was a fan before. I've talked about all the negative things I think he's done in the sport of MMA, but I cannot help myself but get caught up in the fever of what this fight represents. You know what? I know it's a long shot. Conor has the skill, has the ability to give Floyd some issues. Can he beat him? I don't know. Should Floyd win the fight? All the boxing pundits and everyone associated with boxing expects him to and is begging him to make sure this is a wipeout, because if it's not, as some people have suggested, if Conor goes the full 12 rounds and holds his own, even if he loses the fight, that's still a pretty sizable coup for mixed martial arts. But I am fired up for this, and I am 100% behind Conor McGregor because he does represent our sport in this conflict, and quite honestly, I felt he's held his own very well in these press conferences, in these outings, and to me, Floyd looks like he's grasping at straws at times to try and come up with responses or things to say, and Conor just keeps knocking him down left, right, and center, and it's only going to get worse, because the first one, Conor was a little bit unprepared. It looked like they caught him off guard a little bit with the format and the how things were going to play out. He looked like he was in a better spot for Toronto from the clips I've seen. By the time he gets home, that place is going to be going insane. I don't even know if Floyd will show, quite honestly. I wouldn't be shocked to see if something happened. He doesn't show up on that final press stop. Either way, I'm fired up, and I fully intend to be watching that pay-per-view one way or another, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 113, which will take place in Scotland, Glasgow, Scotland, to be specific, and will feature a crackerjack of a main event in the welterweight division, Gunnar Nelson taking on Santiago Ponzinibbio, in a fight that very well could propel the winner into an opportunity to fight for a top 5 spot in the division. I'll be giving you all 6 of my main card predictions on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary bout breakdowns, I believe there are 6 in total, are available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I am significantly behind in my posting of my podcast and everything else. But thankfully, this event takes place on a Sunday. I don't know if I mentioned that already, July 16th. Which is a Sunday, which gives us an extra day reprieve, so I'm not that far behind, even though I'd like to be much further along. So we will get there. It's an afternoon card, so make sure you set your watches. I don't know why you'd say you should be up and watching either way if you're a fan. It looks like a pretty good card. I'm coming off a decent back-to-back showing the last 2 events, combined 16-6 record. The Michael Johnson fight against Justin Gaethje was fantastic. It cost the bet packs some cash. It cost me a lot of cash. I made some big bets, and it came down to Michael Johnson, and he just unfortunately wasn't able to finish the deal. Great fight, though. Very entertaining fight. And you can always take, I'd rather lose an exciting fight than lose a boring fight. I'd win a boring fight over lose an exciting fight, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah, so certainly considered by the bet packs. We've been on a bit of a roll lately. We've certainly been picking up momentum, doing much better of late. We'll hopefully keep it going into the summer. It's a pretty good card. I like some of the picks, some closely lined fights, maybe picking a couple dogs here, but on that note, let's get to that first main card prediction. The main card kicks off in the UFC's heavyweight division as the debuting James Juggernaut Mulheron, 11-1-0, takes on Justin Big Pretty Willis with a current record of 4 wins and 1 defeat. Now, Mulheron is replacing Mark Godbeer. He's had a lot of time to prep. I believe he's had over a month to prepare for this debut opportunity. For Willis, he actually was pulled from his UFC debut, deemed medically unfit just before weighing in for the fight against Marcin Tybura. He actually took the bout on very short notice, so that's not surprising when you look back at it. His last fight took place over a year ago in the organization formerly known as the World Series of Fighting. And he's only fought once a year since 2014. Once 2014, once 2015, once 2016. He might have an opportunity to fight twice in 2017, depending on how this bout goes down. So looking at Mulheron first, he has won 5 fights in a row, 3 by TKO, including a 2016 win over Neil Grove at Bellator 158, probably his most high-profile appearance. Physically, he's only 5'10". He's 3 inches shorter than Willis, who's not a big heavyweight to start with as far as height is concerned. Willis will come in roughly 20 pounds heavier than Mulheron and is 1 year younger. Now, looking at Willis first, he is a trained AKA fighter. He's faced a decent level of competition over his run. Not a ton of experience, obviously. 3 wins by knockout, 1 KO loss, 1 decision victory. He throws a, in the World Series of Fighting win, he had a clinch heavy attack to pick up the victory. He will shoot for takedowns. He has a very big power double. He gets a lot of momentum going. He's very difficult to stop. Once he gets on top, look for him to unload with some ferocious ground and pound. He will use elbows. He knows how to finish, knows how to unload and force that stoppage. He almost reminds me a little bit of a smaller version of Derek Lewis, where he gets on top and it's just difficult to withstand those shots, and the referee's forced to move in. He's got some big power in his punches, decent speed, and moves fairly well for a heavyweight. Now, for Mulheron, 6 wins by knockout, 5 by decision, 1 KO loss. He only has 3 first-round finishes, which isn't typical for a heavyweight. You see him going deeper into fights, rounds 2 and 3, before getting his opponents out of there. His last 3 opponents have combined 28 wins, 21 losses, so they've got some good experience, and not a terrible record for the heavyweight regional scene. One thing to look at Mulheron, he's not a physically impressive fighter. He's the type of guy who would probably get down to light heavyweight, maybe even beyond that, if he cleaned himself up a little bit. But the report is he actually, despite his physical appearance, has a pretty decent gas tank, which is noteworthy. He's got some big power in his right hand. He likes to step into it when he throws it. He'll work in some low kicks and does a lot of his attacking off of a left jab. He puts his punches together fairly well. Not a lot of big windup, just keeps peppering away at guys and breaking them down. As I said, he moves well, above average speed, keeps pressure on, usually the smaller fighter, which allows him to be quicker, be aggressive, and his gas tank, if it holds up, that's great. He really likes to break his opponents down with that constant forward motion. Now, we haven't seen a lot of him on the mat, and that has to be a concern against Willis, who looks like he could come in looking to take him down. The size favors the American here, but if Mulheron can survive that early action, he could take over this fight if Willis slows down. The way I look at it, though, Willis hits exceptionally hard. He could look for those takedowns and unload and stop him there. This reminds me, again, of a less big version of Derek Lewis, type of guy who gets on top of you, and it's just once he gets into a dominant position, look out, it's probably all over from there. Mulheron could give him a go, but my prediction is Justin Willis to defeat James Mulheron by TKO. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the UFC's light heavyweight division as Khalil Rountree Jr., 6 wins and 2 losses, takes on the Bear Jew of Scotland, Paul Craig, currently holding a record of 9 wins and 1 single defeat. Now, this is actually a battle of recent Tyson Pedro victims. Rountree was submitted by Pedro, and Craig lost a fight via TKO. Rountree since scored a knockout victory of Dan Jolly and rebounded from that loss. That's the fight that Craig is coming off of. Physically, Craig's 6'3". He's 2 inches taller than Rountree. He'll have a 2-inch reach advantage. He's also the older man by 3 years. And many people keep pointing out that Rountree appears like he could be better suited to fight at middleweight, but that's a big cut. That's 20 pounds plus, to cut down to middleweight, so maybe he feels more comfortable fighting as a light heavyweight. Now, you look at these two fighters. Craig is by far a submission expert. It's not hard to see. 8 of his 9 wins have come by submission. He's coming off his first loss of his career, which is also one of those things where you usually expect to see fighters come back, look better, and improve. He subbed Henry De Silva in his debut with a beautiful armbar. That's not a sub of choice. He is a triangle guy. He's the type of guy who will go to his back and attack, and he did that. He'll look for triangles. He looked for a nice armbar and snap that up, eventually getting De Silva to submit. I like the way he uses punches to set up his takedowns. He's not, he has shown decent top control once he gets the fight to the ground, but at the same time, he's too willing to give up position for submission, to go to his back, to look to set up that signature move. And it's one of those things that hasn't cost him yet, but when you get to this level, at any point in time, you can see a guy go for submission, miss it, and boom, he's on the other end of some vicious ground and pound, and it can be career-changing. Decent kicks and knees in close. He can strike. It's not as obviously, it's not his forte, but it's certainly an aspect he can work. His clinch attack is decent. He did get himself in some trouble in that position against Pedro, where he simply took too much damage. His positioning wasn't perfect, and he was making some mistakes and simply couldn't recover. Potentially got cracked right off the bat, and that put him in a spot where he wasn't thinking clearly, and just everything unraveled from there on out. He did look, I have seen he has issues with cardio. In the De Silva fight, again, it was his debut, but he looked to be slowing down in the second round before eventually catching a submission. That's something that worries me against a guy like Rountree, who's probably going to make him work hard for takedowns and for opportunities to set up that ground game. And now, Khalil Rountree, he is a massive hitter. The guy throws everything with power. He has just 3 wins by knockout, but he definitely can see that power that he brings to the table. He dropped Tyson Pedro with a massive left hand prior to getting submitted. And that has been kind of the tail of the tape for Rountree. He has had major issues on the mat. He lost his tough final against Andrew Sanchez on the ground. He was submitted by Tyson Pedro. It's just one of those areas that if fighters can get into the mat, that is certainly something that they can exploit. Now, Dan Jolly in his last matchup looked to do that. Rountree did a phenomenal job of sprawling out of that early shot to get it back. He sprawled it again, and once he framed Jolly, he landed a blistering knee that led to a brutal knockout and finished him. And that's what he's all about. If he can turn that one of these guys who can exploit you for, risking a takedown, he can suddenly become that much more dangerous. But the thing is, again, that combination of him throwing everything with power and defending takedowns, it can slow him down if the fight goes deeper. So that's something Craig might look to do. Exhaust him, make him defend takedowns, and eventually they will come. One thing that Rountree has been doing, apparently, he's been working to lean himself out. Be lighter, don't balloon up so heavy so that cut down to 205 doesn't take so much out of you, and that's something, again, we didn't get to see it against Jolly because the fight didn't go that long, but that's something to take note of as we go forward. How does he look at, heading into this fight from the weight cut? Now, ultimately this fight, and I know this is kind of cliche, but a lot of fights come down to who is able to execute their strength first and definitively. Craig is the vastly superior man on the mat. There's no doubt about it. If the fight hits the ground, he should take it with relative ease. Rountree is a far more dangerous striker, and Craig is quite hittable. We saw that in the last matchup. Ultimately, we've seen Rountree struggle with capable ground fighters, both good wrestlers and grapplers. Craig, he can't afford to take too much damage in pursuit of the takedown, but I think he's going to work this fight to the mat eventually. He's an excellent scrambler, so look for him to try and just lock up and eventually try and get Rountree to the mat. If Rountree gets on top and gets free and starts landing that ground and pound, that could be what changes the tail of this fight. But my prediction is Paul Craig to defeat Khalil Rountree by submission. And we are just clicking right along. We've gone from heavyweight to light heavyweight. Hey, now we're in middleweight. That makes sense. South Wales' Jack the Hammer Marshman, 21 wins and 6 losses, takes on Canada's own Ryan Janes with a current record of 9 wins and 2 defeats. Now, Marshman had a pair of very exciting UFC appearances, both ending via knockout, one a win, one a loss. For Janes, he scored a impressive, not impressive, but at least a victorious debut before getting submitted by Gerald Mearshart in his last appearance. Janes, the Canadian, 3 inches taller, will have a 3-inch reach advantage, but he's also the older man by 8 years. Now, looking at Marshman, look at his numbers: 13 wins by knockout. That's impressive. He has 4 losses by knockout, which is concerning. 5-0 in fights ending by submission, 3-2 on the scorecards. For Jane, just a single KO victory. 7-1 now in fights ended by submission, 2-1 in fights that have gone the distance. Now, Marshman is a very aggressive striker. He thrives when he can drag his opponent into a close-range firefight. He is much better at trading on the inside where he doesn't have to worry about a lot of ranged weapons. He can just let his hands fly and hope they connect. Once he's forced to the outside, we saw in the Magnesita Blood fight, especially early on, he's not nearly as effective a striker when he's forced to the outside and forced to try and, utilize those range weapons. He did drop Stevie Ray with a hard left hook in that matchup, and he showed his power prior to eventually finishing him. I don't like the way he has a tendency to come up short with his punches at times. He can be a little bit stiff with his punches and strikes, throwing them with arm, not the way he should be throwing technique-wise, but still, it can be effective. He did give up 4 takedowns over his first 2 UFC fights. Could be an area of vulnerability that Janes looks to exploit. Certainly something that's, in his, it would be perceived to be within his skill set. Now, Janes, despite his submission-heavy win total, relied heavily on his striking in his debut. He used a lot of forward pressure and a left jab to do a lot. Nothing massive. He didn't land anything to blow his opponent out of the barn. You'd almost argue that his opponent landed the heavier strikes. Janes just landed more strikes overall and was the more active fighter. Ultimately, I think he benefited from his lack of output from his adversary, which won't be an issue here against Marshman, who comes to fight. He comes to scrap. And that's certainly worth looking at here. The biggest thing with Janes is he's very hittable. I've seen fights, especially in the regional scene. One of his final pre-UFC fights, he was in big time trouble. He was getting cracked and rocked and was having all sorts of issues prior to rallying and getting the submission. I would say he's not a great wrestler, which takes away from his grappling skills. If you can't get the fight down with at this level, if you can't take a fighter off his feet with consistency to utilize your grappling skills, you might as well not have them. Ultimately, I think Janes has to get this fight to the floor ASAP. But Marshman, does have a history of getting knocked out. Could Janes catch him in an exchange? Possibly. Again, his numbers don't suggest he has that type of power. Marshman, I think, is going to drag him into a brawl. He's going to land the bigger shots. He eventually is going to find a home for something sizable, probably in an early exchange. And my prediction is Jack Marshman to defeat Ryan Janes by TKO. Skipping over the welterweights, we head down to the lightweight division as Scotland's own Braveheart Stevie Ray, 21 wins and 6 losses, takes on the Irish Dragon Paul Felder, 13 wins and 3 defeats for Felder. Now, Felder's coming off a TKO victory, the first stoppage of his UFC career since his sophomore appearance back in 2015, where he took out Danny Castillo in emphatic fashion. He is a winner of 3 of his last 4 appearances. For Stevie Ray, he's fighting at home. He's coming off back-to-back wins, including a split decision win over Ross Pearson, which is a big win for him, considering how much Ross Pearson has meant to the UK fight scene. He also is coming off actually his last fight was a majority decision victory over Joe Lozon, a fight that Lozon, the fighter I picked, nearly had the fight won in the opening round and then faded tremendously, and Ray rallied impressively to pick up a victory. Physically, Felder 1 inch taller, they have the same reach, and Ray is the younger man by 6 years. Now, overall, Stevie Ray, very good striking skills. He's a southpaw, he took out Leandro Maffa with a beautifully timed counter right hand. He throws a nice long right jab, and then a long straight left behind it. He will paw with that right to help gauge the distance. He has good footwork overall. He's relatively light on his feet. He'll mix in some decent kicks. I really like that left high kick. And again, being a southpaw fighter, that opens up some opportunities to place that kick that can do a lot of damage. On the mat, he's a BJ purple belt. He looked for a takedown against Ross Pearson at one point. He completed a single one in that fight. But he has had a lot of issues on the ground. Joe Lozon had a lot of success in that opening round, on the mat. Alan Patrick defeated him with largely a takedown-based offense, and that's an area that certainly could be exploited. When you look at Stevie Ray's record, he's 4-3 in his last 7 fights to go 3 rounds or more. Didn't look great in his Michael Laboute fight in the second half of that matchup, and he has won 2 split decisions of those 4 victories. So that might indicate to you that his offense can make it difficult at times to distance himself from his opponents. Against Ross Pearson, he had 2 very good rounds early on. The third round, he wasn't nearly as successful. He wasn't pushing forward as much as he needed to be, and that's what allowed Pearson to get back in that fight. I picked Ray in that matchup. It was a close fight. I really enjoyed watching it. Now, looking at Felder, he is a black belt in Taekwondo and Karate, a BJJ blue belt, so he's got a lot of combat accreditations. He's a decent counter striker overall. He throws a lot of kicking techniques. When he fought Francisco Trinaldo in a very entertaining but short bout, he was throwing a lot of hard body kicks, which I really liked. Look for him to throw a stepping knee, which can be very devastating. Doesn't always land, but the constant threat of it there forces his opponents to be currently, changing that level of defense, that perspective. Where's the next offense coming from? Got to watch out for that stepping knee coming in. Suddenly it opens up something, an opportunity for something else to sneak through. Trinaldo. Felder has some good pop in his hands. I said we KO'd Danny Castillo with that spinning back fist. He's having a lot of success countering Ricci when Ricci came forward early on, which I really liked from him. And one of the knocks on Felder has been his use of functional strikes instead of, his lack of use of functional strikes, opting for more flashy but less effective techniques, and allowing fights, for example, the Ross Pearson fight, to get away from him because he's just not being efficient with his offense. What I did like in the win over Ricci was he was much more aggressive. He was pushing forward, landing good, simple, but hard and effective combinations. He was attacking the body. He was throwing kicks as well, and just getting the job done, using that power, using his gifts to score points, and eventually finish that fight. As far as Felder's takedown game, he hasn't looked for a lot of takedowns. That could be something he looks to do against Stevie Ray here, who has had some issues on the ground. I don't know if we'll see that or not. This could be a striking fan's delight here. Now, Stevie Ray is fighting at home, but I really like the way Paul Felder came out in his last matchup. I thought he looked very good. He paired his punches up well. He kept attacking Ricci. His counter game looked on point. I think he's going to be the more aggressive fighter. I think he'll offer a higher offense. I think the power and the impact of his strikes will give him a big edge, and while it's always tough to pick against a fighter fighting at home, especially if it goes the distance, my prediction is Paul Felder to defeat Stevie Ray by decision. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the women's strawweight division. Is the 8th-ranked Joanne Jojo Calderwood, also fighting out of Scotland, so certainly she will have the crowd behind her coming into this matchup. The place should go nuts for her. She comes in with a record of 11 wins and 2 losses, and she is taking on the fast-rising 14th-ranked Cynthia Calvillo, undefeated with 5 wins and, of course, no losses, no draws, no contests. It's a pretty clean record. Now, Calvillo quickly is rising up those rankings. She is surging on the strength of 2 UFC victories, both by submission, both against relatively inexperienced, or at least not debuting, but relatively green competition. Gonzalez, was debuting. Cooper was very early in her career, doesn't have a lot of pro fights under her belt, despite having her experience in The Ultimate Fighter. Calvillo has finished 4 of her 5 opponents. For Calderwood, she is 3-2 in the UFC. She has been submitted in both of her losses. She, of course, had the letdown in her season of The Ultimate Fighter, where she just ultimately came up short, despite coming in ranked as the number 2 fighter in the house. Calderwood is 2 inches taller, she'll have a 1 inch reach advantage, and she's actually the younger fighter, I believe, by 2 years, which is surprising. Now, for Calvillo, she trains at a Team Alpha Male, and you really see that heavy grappling attack approach that we've seen in a lot of those TAM fighters. She has 2 wins by knockout, 1 submission win, 1 decision victory. Sorry, 2 submission victories. 2 submission victories. Overall, she has good takedown defense. That's worth noting right off the bat, because that allows her to dictate where this fight takes place. Stuffs her opponent's shots, and she's exceptionally good at countering takedown attempts to get herself into a superior position. We did see her get taken down a couple times in her last fight, but ultimately she made it work out for her. She likes to move to back control when she gets the fight to the ground. She will lock up that body triangle, and she melds together her striking and her transitions and her sub attempts very well. It's just boom one, boom this one, boom that one, and the fight's over. When she fought Cooper, she made a very nice attempt to grab onto an early kick and land a single leg and eventually get the fight to a position she wanted to be. That's worth noting because Calderwood is a very talented and capable kicker who will probably throw those techniques in Calvillo's direction. Against Cooper, and similar against Pro Gonzalez, she won a lot of scrambles, and she used that front headlock position to try and control the position once they got there, and eventually to rotate to that back where she can get, where she can start setting up her opportunities to finish the fight. She was taken down a couple times by Gonzalez, but again, she won the scramble, she got to a better position, and again, she made that initial offensive attempt by her opponent work in her favor. Her striking is still a work in progress. It's improving, but ultimately it's used to help her close the distance, set up her shot opportunity. She throws a decent 1-2. She throws some, some not a bad hard right low kick. She can, and her combinations with that technique. Always looking to pop away with a left jab. Again, lots of movement. She throws, her volume strikes and bursts, but again, it's all about closing the distance. Now, we did see in her last fight against Gonzalez, she was throwing a lot of strikes, and they weren't doing a lot of damage. I felt in the second round that she made her offense waned a little bit, and had Gonzalez not been looking for takedowns of her own, we might have seen her been able to capitalize on some of Calvillo's lesser offensive moments on the feet. Now, for Calderwood, JoJo averages 6.92 strikes length per minute. She is a nasty Muay Thai-based striker. Exceptionally dangerous right hook to the body, and then come up with a left hook to the chin. I like the way she did that. She hurt Courtney Casey with a turning side kick to the body. Again, she has a number of weapons. She's an exceptionally dangerous striker. She hurt Letourneau on multiple occasions, including that push kick to the face/chest area that really knocked her back and eventually led to the finish. Now, She's not perfect on the feet by any stretch of the imagination. She got rocked by Courtney Casey. She's had some issues with opponents outworking her on the feet, and her footwork and head movement's not amazing, so she's there to be hit. So Ham had a lot of success landing strikes on her. She averages almost 4 strikes absorbed per minute, which is a big number. But again, she's landing almost 3 more strikes per minute than her opponents land on her. That usually works out in her favor, not always. We have seen JoJo at times, again, have trouble pulling the trigger. She's right there to land those techniques, and she's just not let her hands go. At the same time, when she does let her hands go, it's just pure violence. Now, the big thing a lot of people are looking at, and that's why I think JoJo is the underdog in this fight, she has been submitted, as I mentioned in the intro, twice in her UFC career, and actually 3 times if you go back to The Ultimate Fighter. She was submitted by Rose, she was submitted by Moroz, and of course Jessica Andrade tapped her out as well. We saw Letourneau and Casey both attack off her back, and what Calderwood has a tendency to do in her pursuit of landing ground and pound from top position and doing some damage, she leaves too much room. Her opponents are able to rotate their hips and lock up a triangle, lock up anything to just attack and create an opportunity to pull off a submission, and it's happened on more than one occasion. I would say Calvillo has to get Calderwood to the mat here early in this fight. Establish those takedowns, make JoJo work, tire her out, and really break her. I cannot see Calvillo faring overly well if JoJo is able to really let her hands go, land with those elbows, land those kicks, just start piling up the damage. Ultimately, Calvillo hasn't faced a lot of adversity in the UFC, and she's picked up a pair of wins over relatively inexperienced opposition. Fighters that... and we have a tendency to do that. She beat this girl definitively. She beat this girl definitively. She's got a great personality. She's exciting. She's fun. She goes out there and fights, a.k.a. Paige Van Zandt. And suddenly they're a favorite over an established veteran. I'm not saying she can't win this fight. And I like Cynthia Calvillo. But honestly, I think we're maybe overblowing her success early on. Calderwood is the vastly superior striker. I think she's going to avoid that early damage. I think we're going to see Calvillo attack, look to get some takedowns. JoJo's going to use her size and her range weapons to kind of push her back. You know, I don't see Calvillo as a powerhouse like Jessica Andrade, who's picked her up and slammed her. I like the fact that Calderwood is fighting at home. I think that's a huge advantage. I think Calvillo is going to get a little bit desperate at times for the takedowns. It's just going to slow down a little bit. Calderwood's going to land the better strikes. And my prediction is JoJo Calderwood to defeat Cynthia Calvillo. I'll take Calderwood by decision. We move now to the main event of the evening, and it is in the UFC's welterweight division. It's a pretty damn fun main event. Let's call a spade here. The 8th-ranked Gunnar Gunny Nelson of Iceland, 16-2-1, training partner of the notorious Conor McGregor, takes on Argentina's own 14th-ranked Santiago Ponzinibbio, coming in with a fantastic record of 24 wins and 3 defeats. Now, both fighters are looking for that opportunity to move up the rankings. Obviously, the winner of this fight will get a push in the rankings. They will also get an opportunity to challenge someone in the upper echelon. Everyone's extremely excited, I would think, with George St. Pierre coming back. Should he retain the title, people want to be in line. I don't say it's going to be one of these guys, but people want to be in line for that opportunity to fight him for the title. Or honestly, if he comes back, challenges the winner of Maya Woodley, and one of those two guys take him out, that's a high-profile fight that one of these guys wants to be a part of. And, you know, with the UFC losing some high-profile fighters, they're looking for that next opportunity for someone to step up and really show us what they're capable of. Now, Ponzinibbio has won 4 fights in a row. He's done it against tough, relatively unheralded opponents, guys that are difficult to deal with, and just he goes out there and beats them. For Nelson, he's won back-to-back fights. Obviously, his loss to Damian Maia was a setback, but you see what Damian Maia has been doing against the majority of the competition in the UFC, minus Jake Shields, Jake the Snake. And, you know, honestly, Nelson's been on another level as well. He submitted both of his last 2 opponents, Albert Tumenov and Alan Jouban, so damn impressive victories in both of those. I loved that Tumenov upset. I picked that, and it played out almost exactly as I expected it to. Not to brag, I'm going to brag. For Ponzinibbio, he is 1 inch taller. He'll have a 1 inch reach advantage. Nelson is 2 years younger, and again, a lot of people are talking about Nelson. Should he go to lightweight? Is that someplace he's more physically, you know, just physically fit or physically preferred to be in that division? It seems not. It's working out for him. Let him do what it works until it doesn't work anymore. Now, looking at their numbers, Ponzinibbio 13 wins by knockout versus I almost called him Roy Nelson. Gunnar Nelson's 12 wins by submission. So you see where their strong suits are. Nelson is 1-2 in decisions. Ponzinibbio's got a pretty good record. I think he's got 5 wins by submission. He's never been submitted, and he's also, I think, he's got a decent record on the scorecards as well. Now, both guys, the thing is, both guys can compete in the other's realm. This is not a striker versus grappler, you know, straight up and down type of fight. Nelson has shown he cannot hurt guys. He's had a couple of knockdowns prior to submitting guys. Ponzinibbio, he's got a number of submissions earlier in his career. So again, they're capable of fighting in the other realm. But honestly, Ponzinibbio does not want to go to the mat with Gunnar Nelson. And while Gunnar would probably fare better standing with Ponzinibbio, if you said you're going to go 5 rounds with Santiago and it's going to be spent entirely on the ground, he probably would prefer not to do that. Ponzinibbio is a BJJ black belt. Keep that in mind. 60% takedown defense. That's pretty solid. But we did see him, I think it was his debut, smothered by Ryan LaFleur on the ground. And that was, certainly an area of concern, but he has shown improving takedown defense. He's very good at getting underhooks on takedown attempts. He uses his legs to create separation, both when he's backed against the cage and if his opponent does happen to get him down. He's very good at creating separation, getting out. Zach Cummins, who's a very good wrestler, a very good grappler in his own right, had a very hard time reaching him, to try and set up those takedown opportunities without taking damage. And when he did get in, Santiago did an excellent job of creating separation and scooting his legs out and getting back to a vertical base and then returning to his striking offense. When you look at Ponzinibbio, he is best when he pressures his opponents. Lots of movement, moving forward, engaging, attacking, and landing with impactful strikes, and a lot of them. He throws very long strikes. He has a very hard right hand. He'll work a left jab as well. He'll throw a jab to the body. When he took out Andreas Stahl, he landed a brutal right hand to stop him there. He hurt Court McGee with the same technique. He tends to attack and burst, which is fine because it keeps opponents guessing. It's not just a constant flow. It makes, if you can be erratic with your offense, that's going to keep them from getting your timing down. Another offensive weapon he likes to use, he has very hard leg kicks, and he can do a lot of damage to opponent's lead leg, and that's one thing with the karate-style stance of Gunnar Nelson, we will see him use that pronounced lead leg. That will open some opportunities for Ponzinibbio to do some damage. With Ponzinibbio is what he likes to have time to set up his offense. He likes to pressure, but again, he likes to do things in his own time. He holds his hands a little bit low at the end of his combination, so there is some areas to be countered. And he can be hurt, but he's very difficult to finish. He's got a lot of heart, and he rallies very well. Looking at Gunnar Nelson now, the guy is dangerous. Nelson is a black belt in karate and BJJ, but he's not a high-volume takedown guy. His UFC best, 2 takedowns against Jorge Santiago forever ago, and more recently against Albert Tumenov. 2 takedowns, but he's the type of guy who makes the most out of those opportunities. How does he get his takedowns? Great question, I'll tell you. Look for him to use the clinch and inside trips to try and put his opponent on the mat. He will shoot from the outside. He has a nice variety of takedown techniques. Once he gets his opponent on the ground, look for him to smother. He is always looking to work and advance his position towards submissions. He really likes that back mount. He's got multiple rear naked choke victories on his record, a couple of neck cranks, so he knows how to finish. Once he gets the fight to the ground, he knows what he wants to do. As I said, Nelson makes the most of his takedown opportunities, looks for submissions. He will punch and change levels for takedowns as well, which I really like. And that's something, again, against a very talented striker like Ponzinibbio, who is going to try and settle in here with his offense early. Nelson wants to show him one thing and then switch gears as quickly as possible, catch him off guard. As I said, Nelson is a capable striker. He dropped both Brandon Thatch and Omari Akhmedov prior to submitting them. Again, those don't go down as anything that would suggest in his record that he's a dangerous striker, but if you watch the fights, you know that he's capable of doing damage on the feet. He uses that largely karate-based stance. He's very calm, very measured. He fights from range very well. He can counter-strike. He throws good body and head kicks, minimal wind-up, and he will flurry with his hands if he gets the opportunity to push forward. Now, a couple things I don't like. He tends to hold his hands very low. Against Rick Story, he was a little bit too nonchalant in that decision victory where he took some big shots. The damage started piling up. The leg kicks started piling up and really taking some of the bounce out of Gunnar Nelson's offense. He slowed down. He simply got outworked. He got dropped in the 4th round of that fight, and that's something worth noting here against another guy who hits very hard, and you don't want to allow him to really get in a rhythm and start piling up the damage. When I look at how these two are going to pair up, I think Nelson sits back way too much. He's looking for that opportunity to spring forward and land something significant, drop you, or score a takedown and put you on the mat. And that's an issue against Ponzinibbio, who's very busy and puts a lot of mustard on those strikes. When he hits you, he hurts you. And that's whether it be a leg kick, a body shot, something to the chin or head. He can do a lot of damage in a short period of time. I think the movement, speed, and size of Ponzinibbio, who's a bit bigger than Gunnar Nelson, is going to make it tough for Gunny to get in with consistency and land those takedowns. I'm not saying you couldn't get in one takedown and finish this fight. Absolutely. But if he can't get the fight in, get in on that initial shot, and Ponzinibbio gets some courage, gets some confidence up, gets in a roll, starts doing damage, it's going to get more and more difficult for Ponzinibbio to get that, for Gunnar Nelson to get in that position to use those grappling skills. Gunnar Nelson, I think, is the more well-rounded fighter, but I think Ponzinibbio has the more... It's hard to say he has a more dangerous skill set because you don't know what Nelson's capable of doing on the ground. This is going to be a very close fight. I honestly can see it going either way. But my prediction is Santiago Ponzinibbio to defeat Gunnar Nelson by decision, simply landing the better strikes early on and pulling away as the fight progresses. So Santiago Ponzinibbio by decision over Gunnar Nelson. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 113 in Glasgow, Scotland. Should be a fairly fun card overall. Again, it's the afternoon where I'm from. I don't know where you're from, so you'll have to figure out that for yourself. I highly recommend, and again, I sound like a fanboy, and I am. Maybe my enjoyment of Conor McGregor has been rejuvenated by this, the fanfare that's going into this. I highly recommend you checking out any of the press conferences. I believe they're on Fight Pass. If you have access to Fight Pass, you can go back and watch them. They just are fantastic. You just, as a fight fan, as a guy who likes to see two guys get in each other's face and eventually lead to some kind of fight, or a quarter of a fight, as Connor likes to call it, this is just awesome. They're in their face, they're chewing, they're going back and forth. It's cool to see Dana White up there on one side, even though he's a prick at times, a lot of times, and then boxing guys on the other side. It's just, it's a lot of fun, and it's something that might be a once in a lifetime opportunity to see this fanfare, see this, this scenario play out. So I hope you get an opportunity to enjoy it. I certainly have. And buy the bet packs if you're interested. I'm on Twitter. Again, I haven't been very active lately. I'm trying. And on Facebook, all other crap, just social media. Check out my website for my predictions, everything else. And thank you guys for tuning in. I got a lot of work ahead of me because I got some prelim predictions I got to get on. So take care and talk soon. Bye-bye.